on this computer. There we go. Well, last month we had Fabrice join us, and he made reference to this cool new technology they were using, putting the Linux version of FileMaker server. And he mentioned Docker, and I've been long wanting to see FileMaker server in Docker. So that piqued my curiosity. And so he's so graciously agreed to do a presentation this month on hosting and the various ways you can host your FileMaker server. And so for those who need a little catch up when he's done, then he can talk about the real techie geeky thing that I guess Roman has come up with. So Fabrice, as we mentioned last month, is from Belgium. Well, actually, he's in Belgium. You were originally from France, or so you went to school in Paris?
Yes, that's the short version. Yes, exactly.
And and his business is all over Europe, and he's well known in the FileMaker community. I've seen his name on forums all over the place, and for many years. So it's a real privilege to have him.
Call me old.
Oh, no. I mean, after Stephen, I don't mean to put Stephen down, but Stephen takes the crown there, and then I'm right behind him. So anyway, so Fabrice, why don't you introduce yourself and Roman, and you got the podium.
Okay, thank you. Yes, thank you for having me a second time in a month. I promise that after that I will leave you alone for a while, because I don't like speaking so much. So we will do this presentation, the two of us. Romain, do you know, who's now in Paris, and who is actually our hosting genius, and he's the one who really, worked around all the problems that we had to have FileMaker run on Docker. So maybe Romain will share his screen from now, and I will go through the first part of the presentation to to talk about the various ways one can share or host a FileMaker database or application, and then Romain will show you. We'll talk more precisely about Docker and demo our own service. So of course, this presentation is not meant to be a commercial presentation. We want to introduce the Docker to the ones who don't know it yet. And but as to my knowledge, we're still the only service to use Docker and to offer Docker. We will have to use our own service to demo it. And that's for the second part of the presentation. So first of all, let's talk about the different ways to host a FileMaker app. Romain, would you switch go to the next slide? All right. So there are the two major ways of having a file on a FileMaker server. There's the on-premise, where your server is really on your physical network, in your office, in your premise, and the online family of hosting. So first, let's have a glance at the on-premise. So again, you have a computer running FileMaker server in your office, and you're connected through a LAN network, and that's it. There are many advantages for that. You can choose the OS you want. You can run on a Mac OS, Windows, or Linux. You keep your data at home. So if you're, in some industries, they're still very, cautious about uploading data and so on. So your data is at home. And if you can afford this kind of system, you will get the best performance because you're you're on a local network. You have very, very good ping. There's not even, it's under a millisecond ping time. So you can get the best performance, obviously. So the pros and cons, let's say you have the best possible performance if you're on a LAN network. Your data is safe at home. Well, is it really safe at home? Are you so sure that it is safe? We'll see. And the cons is that it requires a real knowledge of the network in IT. Your data is not so safe after all, because one of the major cause for losing data is if your computer is stolen or breaks or things like that. So this still happens. How about vacations? If your IT person is away, so you have to have at least a backup person. Not so obvious, quite costly. And if you have users who connect remotely, then you have to have a very good connection to the internet. Earlier, before this presentation, Jonathan was saying that he has better upload than download, but this is quite an exception. So, of course, if the internet breaks, well, the remote users cannot connect. This is pretty obvious, but that's it about the on-premise way of hosting. So now let's switch to, so now imagine you have a remote server, which can be anywhere, say in a data center, for instance. And then let's compare the different pros and cons. So you can have lower price than having your own machine. You have a good network. I mean, you have a good network connection. Sorry. Okay. You can manage your server and you're the master. But on the other side, you still require real knowledge about network. You need to maintain the security and be aware of all good practices. And still, what happens if your IT person is away? So now, so that was the solution. Sorry, the private hosting, I'm told, wasn't clear. It's if you manage your own server in the cloud, such as AWS or things like that. That's, you have a machine in the cloud. The hosting providers. So there are numbers of FileMaker hosting companies, of course. There are pros and cons as well. The pros is that they master security. They know how to do it. So that's a pro. They have good support. I guess it depends on the company you are talking to, but in general, I mean, there's a rather good level of support. Expertise. These are companies that really know about FileMaker, not only about the IT, but they especially know about FileMaker server and so on, and they're able to help you with that. Availability of the service. It's much easier to have an available, I mean, you have a much better availability than if you host your file yourself, or if you manage your own server. And you have extra services that are usually included or very easily available, such as external backups, SSL certificates, and so on. On the cons side, well, if you lose your internet connection, of course, you can't work. And that will be the case for all, cloud systems. You're not always aware of where is your data. It really depends on the provider you choose. So in certain countries, it has a real impact because also there are some legal issues about where the data is stored. SLA, are you sure about the the reaction time? If you encounter any issue, you really have to read the small print. But you can be aware of that before choosing a service. And that's it about hosting providers. So now hosting solutions, you have several options. I hope I'm not too fast. So if you choose to go, to host your server online, you have several options. We will browse through multiple ones with more details for some than others, of course. First, having a Mac Mini in the cloud, then shared hosting, then dedicated physical, we'll see what it means, virtual, FileMaker Cloud, and containerized container or Docker way of hosting. So this is our agenda for the next minute. And I hope this all clarifies. So Mac Mini used to be a very good option. It's a Mac, it's easy to use. You can manage it yourself if you're a Mac addict. Well, on the cons side, it's a Mac Mini, and in data centers, it does not really make sense, or already, just storing a Mac Mini in a data center already sounds a little bit awkward. So, but still exists. It's rather expensive. Hosting a Mac Mini in a data center is expensive. Not to forget that you also need external storage. You wouldn't store, important data in the disk of the Mac Mini. Otherwise, you would risk extremely long data recovery in case of a disaster, of a disk crash, and so on. And it's rare. Only very few data centers propose to host Mac Minis. Well, if you need to update the hardware, or you have or if you need to update also the software, FileMaker server or the system, you have quite long downtime. And actually, all in all, it doesn't make sense really anymore. It used to, but with the Linux version, there are really easier ways to host even a simple server. So about shared hosting, let's say a word, because of course, when we think that this is past, it's over, we are not entitled, since FileMaker 15, the license terms does not allow to do shared hosting, which means having several customers sharing the same FileMaker server. In fact, it's still a valid option with the SBA partners. So partners who have a vertical solution with the SBA software bundle agreement with Claris are still allowed to do shared hosting. But as we will see with Docker, there is a better way, because it still means sharing server still means that if there is a problem on a server, all customers, all databases are in trouble. You need to restart, you need to update, and so on and so forth. So dedicated physical server, it means you purchase or rent a physical machine and have it in a data center. There are pros and cons, of course. First of all, you can choose the OS, just like on the local server. You can choose Windows, Linux, Mac, Mac, no, not really, but Linux or Windows, certainly. You have very good performance. I mean, you can absolutely control performance because you can choose the hardware. So for at comparable resource, it's a very good option for performance. And you're sure that all the machine resources are completely available for you. On the other side, it's expensive, especially if you think you need to have the data recovery plan. We'll talk about it in a minute. You need to have basically at least 2 servers just in case. It's not scalable. If you need to add memory or add disk, well, you need to change the hardware, so it's not scalable. If you need to update the OS or FileMaker server, again, you need downtime. You have a long downtime, and the data recovery plan can be significantly slower than with next options that we'll see. And it's limited to your host capacity. So of course, I mean, yeah, you can't host more than what the hardware allows. That's pretty obvious. Then let's move to virtual server. Virtual server is actually the most popular nowadays. So it's probably, if you have hosting services, virtual server is what you are currently using, even if you don't know about it. So the pros of virtual server, it's scalable. It really depends on the provider. Some provider offer different possibilities when it comes to scalability. So you've got to pay attention before you choose an option with them. The cost is relatively low, especially if you have low number of users. If you need a very robust machine, then on the contrary, it can become very, very expensive. So performance can be pretty good, but of course it's not as good as if you have the full control over the hardware. You basically share the resources with other customers on the same hardware. This is the principle with virtualization. So again, it's an independent operating system, FileMaker server installation, and so on. So if any of those components need to be updated, you have a significant downtime. And the cost can become really significant for large teams, or if you need a lot of resources. Actually, I think every time I'm looking at the price, I'm always surprised how the curve can be, sharp. It becomes very expensive very quickly. On FileMaker Cloud, so this is the Claris offering since I think 3, 4 years. So is in fact virtual machines on Amazon. Only you have an abstraction layer, so you don't have to manage the Amazon not so easy to handle interface and so on. But basically, this is the service it runs on. The pricing for very small teams under 10 users with no more than 3 databases is very good. It has very good performance. They deployed this year, I think, in the data centers worldwide. I mean, the second version of the service, and they have pretty good performance indeed. Also, there's now this baseline of cloud-first approach, which means that some features are delivered a little bit earlier on FileMaker Cloud than on the classic FileMaker server. The truth is that it's more, you know, there are more features in better versions. So for instance, currently you can create your start working with a new database directly in the browser. That's a FileMaker Cloud only feature that will, of course, reach other versions of FileMaker Server in the future. Some plugins are working on FileMaker Cloud and are not working on FileMaker Server on Linux. This is the case for some important plugins such as 360works. Scribe, I think, for instance, is at the moment working for a reason I am actually, I don't know, but it's actually running on FileMaker Cloud and not on FileMaker Server on Linux. On the other side, well, the SLA can be, well, arguable. Let's say it's 24 hours, which is a very long time if you're really stuck. There is a daily maintenance, so you can actually opt out, but otherwise, by default, the server is restarted. The pricing was very good with very small teams, but we are recorded, so I won't say it, but it's really, it can be really high with, you know, large teams. And there is no custom web publishing, XML or PHP. This is true for all versions of Linux hosting. And the download or upload process of a database is not so easy. You've got to go through FileMaker Pro to upload a database, which is fine when your database is only a few megabytes, but becomes a little more tricky when you need to upload tens of gigabytes of data. So this is something, and this is an issue that customers have told us about. Okay, and now we've been through all, you know, classic ways of hosting file. I hope it's clear and I wasn't too fast. Of course, there will be room for questions after this presentation. And now we're going to show you and to talk to you about Docker, which might be very new to most of you. Actually, it's quite new for me too, but I will let Romain, our expert, present you the container approach in Docker.
Okay, thank you, Fabrice. I'm not very comfortable in English, so unless I have drink a bit, so I've just recorded the first part of my presentation, so it will be easier for you to understand. Then I will go live for the demo. Okay, let's go.
Okay, let's talk about containers. What is a container? What does it change? Why is it so different than virtual machines? Well, first of all, at the low level, a container is just a set of processes that are isolated from the rest of the system. That means that it's just a process, normal process like application that are running at the OS level and that just don't see the rest of the system. They're just running inside their own environment. That means that unlike virtual machines, a container does not need a guest host. It just uses the host kernel that is shared amongst all the processes to run. As you can see, it's a Linux kernel, so Docker actually is only running on Linux. It can run inside a virtual host, but as a warning, I will say that Docker is also available for Windows and Mac OS, but it has to be running over Linux. So that means that under Windows or Mac OS, it uses the system OS virtualization system, Hyper-V for Windows and HyperKit for Apple, for Mac OS, to run a small Linux virtual machine that will be able to run the containers. So you can run Docker inside a virtual host, but that virtual host must be a Linux host. So as I said earlier, it's running inside an isolated environment, so which are called user spaces, so that each container, each process from the container will only see its own user space, so its own file system, let's say. Also, a container can run inside another container. That's very special. Unlike virtual machine, you can't run a virtual machine inside another virtual machine. Well, in Docker, with containers, you can run containers inside other containers. And also one specific thing, that there is no graphical UI for containers. As it is only process, you won't have, it won't run a graphical UI app. You may have something like a web server with a web page to administer your app, but it won't be a graphical UI such as Windows or Mac OS or even Linux graphical UI. So just to compare a virtual machine against containers, first of all, virtual machines are hardware level process isolation, while containers are only OS level process isolation. Well, each VM uses a separate operating system, while a container only share the host operating system. One of the biggest difference between VM and containers is the boot time. With a virtual machine, you have a full OS to start, whereas in containers, it's only a process. So a boot time for a virtual machine can be quite long, where a container is just, it starts like it's like an app. Also, the virtual machines are most of the time are very heavy because well, it's a full OS, so it's generally several gigabytes instead of containers that only embed the binaries that needs to be running your apps. So generally it's more lightweight. It's only most of the time it's only a few megabytes. For example, the smallest containers is the Alpine Linux distribution, which is only 4 megabytes, I guess. So it's really, really lightweight. Well, as I said, it boots in minutes for a virtual machine, but it's also very long to create a virtual machine. Whereas containers can be created really quickly. One of the greatest things with containers is that an image is made of different layers, and you can build new image using existing ones. For example, if you have let's say Docker Ubuntu with Apache image, you can just use this image and add the few libraries you were needing, like let's say PHP, and create a new image with this one. And that means that all image that depends from your Ubuntu with Apache image will share those same layers, and you just need to add the few layers to install the PHP. So it will be really really fast to create, because it will use something that is really already existing and just add the few things which is missing, instead of a virtual machine where you will have to install everything from scratch most of the time. And so, of course, because of all these things, well, a container use less resources because it doesn't run unnecessary things like the full OS, which doesn't make sense. So just to show you the difference in terms of architecture, so here is what a virtual machine system is. So you have the server hardware on which you install the host OS that will be running an hypervisor which will, well, virtualize your system to be able to install guest OS on which you will install your actual libraries, so your application libraries, files, and then you will be able to run your app. On the other hand, with a Docker, with container system, you will still have your server hardware and host operating system, but then you will have a Docker process which will have in charge to create to create networks, to create volumes, and to isolate, to create the isolation of your process, your containers. And then you will use single images to run your app. And this is one of the biggest part here. As you can see here, to run your app, you need the guest OS and the binaries of your app. So all the files, like let's say your FileMaker server installation. On the other side, with Docker, you will have an image that will contain only FileMaker server installation, well, your app installation, and most of the time all the dependencies which cannot be present on the host, so it will include its dependencies in an image that will be used to run one or multiple times your app. So that means with one image you can run your app as many times as you need, well, in the limit of your hardware resources. For example, if we use a FileMaker 19.2 image, if you want to run two instance of your server on a virtual machine, you will have to run two guest OS and to install twice your FileMaker server to run your app. Where in Docker, you will just pull the image of FileMaker server and you will run it multiple times at the same time. You will only have one installation, so that means you will gain a lot of space on your server. And in the meantime, you may have another image, which could be FileMaker 19.1, which will be running another server here. It's not a problem. You can have many ones running on the same OS. So, why is it a game changer? Well, I think you guessed that with what we've seen. It changed many things. First of all, as we have just seen, the fact that we are sharing the image, which means you have only one installation that can be run anytime you want. So you gain lots of space on your host. There's no more update process. I will show you just right after. You don't need to go into your machine to download the new FileMaker server version and to run the installation. With Docker, it doesn't exist anymore. You just have to pull a new image. Well, it has to be created first, but once it's created, you just have to pull the image and say, okay, stop my container, restart it using the new image. And it's just the time of, stopping FileMaker service. Once it's stopped, the container is replaced by the new one using all your files, and it runs with the new version. And even more, you can run, you can downgrade with this way, just by changing a number in a command line. That's really amazing. Then Also, of course, as there is no more virtualization process, then there is better performance because there's no more overhead on CPU cycles or disk operation. So that provides all the capacities of your host, so you can have better perf. It Well, it's a new way of deploying FileMaker, and I think it will be in the near future. It could be the main way to deploy FileMaker servers. And at the end of that, well, it reduces the cost, of course, because you need less resource, so you just have reduced cost. Okay, it's time for the demo now. Well, first I'm going to show you a simple use case, not FileMaker yet, just to solve a simple problem. Let's say you're a web developer and you want to test PHP code against a different version on a Linux system. First, how would you solve this? Well, you could just use a VM. You would then need to download an image and install the system, or probably would find a self-made image of the system. Then you would install PHP and Apache and configure it using a more or less up-to-date tutorial. It would be really painful, and you would have to do it again for each PHP version, which could be really long. With Docker, it can be very easy. We can just run a single command line. Let's say here, just docker run, use a PHP 7.2 Apache image, and that's it. Let me show you. It's really, really easy.
Okay, so here is now the good part. So as I said, we are going to run a server, a simple server, just using a single command line. Okay, so if I take back the command line here, sorry, perhaps you hear my kids just the door. Okay, so here, yeah, I have a small, a small directory with a PHP file, which just say hello, Kentuckiana. And I would like to run it inside some Docker PHP server. So I'm going to my folder here, and I will run my command. Here I ask Docker to run an image which is called here PHP 7.2 Apache. So it's an image that is provided on Docker Hub. And I just tell him here to mount the current folder inside the var/www/html from the container. So inside the container, there's a web root. It's just in the documentation of the container. And you just have to put your files here, to mount your files to make them available for your container. So I just run the container. Here, as you can see, the container is not, the image is not available from inside. I didn't download it yet, but he went to Docker Hub to download the image. And it's now available right inside my, we'll try to get a new window here, okay. And if I go here, say localhost, and okay, here it is. My page is here, and I have a web server running. I can change anything in this file, and you will see that it should change. Oops. Okay, let's just have the second one. Okay, it's the actual server. Now, what if I want to test it under PHP version 7.2? I would like to test under PHP version 7.3. So I will just here stop and remove that container. which will just remove the server and not remove my project file, let's say. And I will run again the command and just say, okay, now just pull the 7.3 image of PHP. Okay, it runs. Here again, it's downloading the image. And you can see it's quite fast. Well, once it's downloaded one time, it's you can run it instantly. Okay, here I am. I can refresh, and as you can see here, I have the new version PHP 7.3, which has been installed. And it's just the same URL. I just had to run this command, and it was okay. And if I want to roll back to 7.2, let's remove. And oh, my kid is really crying. Okay, and let's run the 7.2 again, and here, as you can see, it's already up because the image was already downloaded locally, so it was instantly up again. Okay, now if I want, I can just have both versions running aside. I can just ask here to say, okay, well, why not trying on PHP 8, which is the newest version. Here, what's happening is that all the web servers are running and exporting their port 80, which is the default HTTP port. And here with the -p option, we are mapping the port from the container to our system. That's why here I'm able to access through the address localhost, which is HTTP here, so it's by default the port 80. That's why I can access my container from my system. If I didn't here expose the port, I won't be able to access the server from the container. But what is interesting here is that I can choose the ports on which port it will be accessible on my host. Here I just say, okay, now run another server, but map the port 80 to the port 81 from my computer. And when I run it, there's two things that are interesting here. The first one is that, as you can see here, it only downloaded some parts of the image. All those parts here is saying that it already exists. That's the layers I was talking about earlier. The layers are the small parts of the build process of the image, which are the states, different states of the system, which were recorded like diff images, and they are joined together. And when an image use the same parts, well, it does not have to download it again. Your computer already have it, so it just bring the new part he's missing, or the part that have changed. And that helps you keep safe storage, because if those parts were, let's say, 200 megabytes, and the whole part is 400 megabytes, then it means that the both images that are sharing this only weight 600 gigabytes, for example. And here, if I go here and now let's say I want localhost on port 81, hey, I am on version 8, and I got both running on the same side, on the same server at the same time. So that is what is the purpose of Docker. This example was quite simple, but let's have a look on how it will work now with FileMaker. So I will just show you here when you install macOS or Windows, there is a small console where you can see your running containers. So here I have my two Apache web server that I will just delete from now. Okay, and for the demo, I have built two versions of FileMaker server. The first one is the 19.1.2, which was the first Linux version available, and the latest one, the 19.2.1. So as you can see here, the size is 3 gigabytes, which is quite large for a Docker image. This is because the FileMaker install is really heavy, and also it requires a lot of dependencies. But in the meantime, those two images are sharing the same base, which is my CentOS base image here, which is 1 gigabyte. So it means that those two images actual weight is only 2 gigabytes. Okay, well, when it's come to run a FileMaker server over Docker, first, of course, you need to build the image. So you need to install in some way the FileMaker server inside a Docker container. I won't show you the process here because it's quite long and quite complicated. There's someone who shared, I think it was yesterday or perhaps last week, someone who shared a library on Docker. I will give you the link that will allow you to build your own image. I can share you an image because well, FileMaker don't allow us to share pre-installed FileMaker images. So I would just give you a link where you will be able to create your own image. So one point here is when it comes to run some complicated image like FileMaker, there is something which is called Docker Compose, which is well, a way instead of writing command lines like you can see here, which are a bit complicated. And when it comes to FileMaker, you need lots of parameters. So so it would be really difficult to write by hand here. So we can use some files, Docker Compose files, which are in a YAML format. And in those files, you can describe what kind of Docker service you want to run. So here I will just say, okay, let's run, for the first, we're going to run the FileMaker server, and I choose here the version 19.1.2. I will just, some interesting option here are the volumes. The volumes are, well, spaces in the image that will be replaced by a folder. Well, a folder will be mounted in those places, and it's very important because data from an image will be loaded by default. But if you don't save it into a volume, when you will recreate the image, all the data that were write into the running container that are not in a volume will be removed, will be deleted with the container. So there are some folders which are important to mount, like the database folder, the backup folder, the preference folder, if you want to save your preference when you upgrade your server, for example. Here I also add the extension server folder and the C-store, which is where I store the licenses and the SSL certificate. So there are many others, but I didn't want to put too much here. So these are the folders that are going to persist when I will update my container. And of course, here I can map the port. So with a FileMaker server, we always have the port 80 and 443, which is HTTPS, and of course 5003 and 16,000. So this means my container will run, expose those ports, and I will expose those ports directly on my host, so it can be available. So to run this, I will just go to the folder where I put my Docker file here, my Docker Compose file, and I will just run docker-compose, okay, up -d, and D is for daemon, just to release the terminal. Okay, let's run it. The image is already here, so it says it's create my volumes, and it runs my server. And okay, my server is already here. It should be available. I will show you here. Okay, and I have put the default login password so I can log in. Okay, I'm here, I'm logged in. As you can see, my server, oh, I forgot to save, so I'm on the wrong version. Yes, I forgot to save here the version, so it doesn't matter, as you will see later. So my server is up. I'm not sure, I will try, I'm not sure it will be exposed. I don't think we will see. No, I won't see if it's Linux version. Okay, so my server is up and I'm able, if I want to upload, I will run FileMaker and say, okay, no, you can't see it. I will share a file, single file, up, always on the wrong screen. Browse to some, okay. I had some files to test. Okay, don't mind. I will run this one. Oops. So it's uploading my file. Okay, and I'm done. And okay, my hub is here. And as you can see, I'm connected on my server. And this one is a Linux one. So, oh no, I should not close it. Where is my screen? Okay. Because I wanted to see you something. Okay, the app is up and running here. Now I have changed here because I forgot to save earlier. I have changed the version. So now I want to roll back, let's say, to the 19.1.2. Okay, I just changed in my file here the number of the version number, and I run again my command. And he will see that something has changed, and he says, okay, he's recreating FileMaker. And as it is running in a service, it's now closing FileMaker service. So it asks me to close the database. Okay, it will wait until the FileMaker service has closed. And once it's closed, it will just switch the image, start again the container. As you can see here, it started again. And voila. I just open it again. And if I log in, hey, now it's version 19.1.2. So that's the trick. With Docker, I didn't install anything. I just pull the image and swap it. It's just easy as it. Well, easy as it. It's a bit more complicated if you want to run it in production, because there are way more volumes to share and some other issues to address. I will show you, for example, here I am able to run. I will just change again the version, and let's say, okay, I want to run a second server aside. I won't expose those ports, I don't care. I will switch the ports. So, okay, I run a second server, but you can only use a port once on the host. I will say, okay, the second server, which is exposing is port 5003, I will change it to 5004 on my main server, and I will change it, the admin console port, to 6001. So I just changed this file here, and I will run again this command, but I will just say, okay, now let's change the project name and say P, okay, server 2, and it should do, yes, it should be good. No, it was but before. Okay, so like here they say, okay, you want to run the service with another name, so it just duplicate the service and runs it. Okay, I have a second server which is running now. And if I go into okay, my admin console here and say, okay, it says 6001, and I log in again. Hey, here is my version 19.2, and as you can see here, the database I uploaded earlier is not here because this well, this stack, it's called a stack, is not using the same volumes, and we can see it here when running here. I have my two FileMaker server which are running. They are both running on the same Docker host, but they are using different volumes. Perhaps I can show you. It will be, yes, here it will be easier. This is Portainer, which is a tool to administer Docker servers, and it's way more easier to understand how it works. So here, if I comes to the server 2, I will see that here I have some volumes which have been named with the service process name. So they are both using different storage location. Okay. Last thing to show you is okay. I've told you that it was well, it was only process running on the host. So let me show you how it is actually. So I will run into the Docker virtual machine, which was created on the Mac to run the containers. Okay, so here I am now inside the virtual machine, hyperkit virtual machine, which is running the actual containers. And if I run the PSA command, which will show all the process which are running, you can see here that it's a full system which is running with all the things. That's here. This is the Linux host. This is the host system. And in the host system, you can see here there are many FileMaker processes which are running. And the interesting thing here is that if I grab the FM server D, you can see that there are two server D which are running. It's because they are both running on the same system. That's something you won't be able to do on FileMaker. You can't run on FileMaker on macOS or Windows. You won't be able to start two servers of the same process here. The FM server D, you won't be able because it's a whole server. They are both running at the same time on the same OS. And that is what Docker is actually. This is, they are both here running. And if I go into one of those containers, let's say this one, I can log into the SSH console. And if I here run the same command, you will see that, oh, there's nothing here. Oh, maybe the hey. There are only here some few processes that are running. There are systemd because FileMaker is running on. It's using systemd to administer all the process. So there are systemd and some very few processes, but all the rest here are from the FileMaker running system. Okay, as you can see here, most of them are run by FileMaker. Okay, I think I'm done with the demo. I'm open to any question now.
Hi, Romain. Can I ask you a question about, because from your demo, it looks like it's possible to be hosting two separate servers on the same host.
Yeah.
But from FileMaker Pro itself, FileMaker Pro would pretty much just connect over port 5003.
Yeah.
So wouldn't that be conflicting if you have two servers on the same host and FileMaker Pro is attempting to connect with just 5003?
Yes.
What's going to get listed?
Yes, what I've shown you here is just an example of the fact that you are able to run 2 servers aside. But if you do what I've done here, I mean, just changing the exposed ports, so you have the both running aside, the problem will be exactly a FileMaker, which will be redirecting you to the wrong port because it's always using the same ports. So if you want, and that's the point with our hosting service that I will show you right after, it's that when you need to host multiple servers on the same host, you need to have multiple IP address. You need to bind addresses to your to each of your Docker containers.
I see.
It's just like if you have when you have a virtual server, you also need virtual IPs to share any FileMaker host. The thing is, when you are on when you rent a VM in a provider, they already give you a dedicated IP address.
Mm-hmm.
So you need some IP failover or something like that to run it on Docker.
Very good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question, Mike Ross here.
Yeah.
So I just recently got on board with a new client who immediately had hypervisor running of the virtual machine, and the actual physical hardware went down. So they lost some backups because the backups were on a virtual drive on the same physical machine. And of course, there's ways to fix that. So I'm a little bit curious about backup strategies with containers to be able to get the data out of there so that it is secure on separate hardware.
Well, there's no magical way here. I mean, you can bind mount the backup folder. It can be another it's another drive, but there's still the limitation of FileMaker, which does not allow you to back up on a remote volume. So you still need a way to back up, to externalize your backup somewhere else.
So with a virtual machine, typically the way that you get around this problem is you may be backing up to a virtual drive on the same hardware, but you could be doing snapshots on a regular basis, capturing those backups and putting them on separate hardware.
Yes, for those who are providing snapshots, yeah, like in AWS. Well, if you're running a virtual Docker on a virtual machine, then you could use the snapshots as well. It will work the same way. Now it depends. Docker, there are some volumes providers. There are many ways to use volumes in Docker. There are many volume providers, and some of them support snapshots, but it's not the most used ones. Generally, you rely on your OS or your provider's snapshot system.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So perhaps yes.
If I may ask, because you said something about bind mount, and there was also a distinction with volume mount. Would you care to just explain some of the distinctions here?
Well, it's yes. There, with Docker, you can, for example, create a volume which will be stored somewhere by Docker itself, and there are things interesting with this is that Docker will automatically populate that volume with the data which are in your image. Let's say, for example, I've just mounted here the. Okay, I say, okay, create a volume. I didn't specify where I want here my database volume to be created on the system. So that's Docker, which will create it and manage it in its own system, let's say. And that way, Docker when the volume will be created the first time, it will also populate it with all the data which were present in the image that we've used with. So let's say, for example, here my database folder from the image contains the sample solution. So it was directly copied, yes, he copied it in the folder, and he automatically set the permissions. There's another way. The bind mount is where you can specify directly a physical path on the host. Let's say here I could say, okay, I have a folder here, and let's say data slash databases, and then that it will say, okay, please Docker, like a bit like the way I want the web boot folder earlier. Here I say, okay, it will be on in those paths on the host, but I will need, if I need data inside this folder, I will need to populate it myself, and eventually also manage all the permissions, because Docker will be probably running with another user, and when it creates the folder, because if the folder does not exist, he will create it, then he will presumably he will create it with like the root access. So perhaps that your virtual your container won't be able to write inside of it.
Okay, so you'd recommend using volume mounts more than bind mounts.
That's the better way.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, welcome. Perhaps I could show you what we've done with our hosting service now, which is, well, how we can use Docker in a professional hosting service. Let me show you how you can easily, well, just rent a new server and have it available in less than 5 minutes. Okay, here we have our web page with a single formula, a single form where you can we ask you to give us your name, of course, and just some few information like your email address and your mobile number. So, so you will receive your password. And just here, we ask you for your country, let's say United States. And all those fields are not mandatory, so you can just bypass them. We ask you if you want to provide your license or if you need a new license. We plan to improve this formula, this form, so you won't have to put your license here. But let's say for now, for the demo, let's say, okay, I would like a 5-user license. So our system will get a code for you to choose the best license that suits your need. I will select here, okay, the license, and I select here the data center where I want my server to be running. Let's say US East Coast. And here I just need to choose my my server address. So all the server address are with .fmp.fm. So I just create a key FMP. I click on next. I check if the subdomain is available. You get your code here, and you just have to run the 7-day free trial button. Okay. And here we are. The process now should be launched on our side, and the server should be available in a few moments. I think it will be like generally it's less than a minute. Okay, I can see it's running. Perhaps I can show you on my side here. Yes, I will show you something else while waiting. So our service is built on like what we call the infrastructure as code. So like I showed you earlier, the Docker Compose file, it's not Docker Compose file, but something that can be similar. And everything is described in a repository managed by Git. And with this repository, we describe the servers we need. And when you order a new server on our website, then it automatically creates a commit inside our repository. And we have a runner here that is looking for actions to do when the repository change. And then if it detects a new server, for example, then it will take the code and choose where in the code, in which region or which data center you want to create the server. And it will, well, send everything here on the host and deploy your container. Okay. It will deploy in the container. Those containers and all our data center, all the data centers and where we have our containers are all linked to S3 storage for our backups, and all our backups are externalized. So that means that we never store all the backups in the same data center as where the server is. So we are able to recover the files if something went wrong in the data center. We also have some control center that allows us to access any of the hosts we are running under SSH, and it's secure, so we don't have to well, we don't have to give access to some people that shouldn't, or to expose any port outside of our running infrastructure. And we also have some monitoring servers, which are redundant, so we can always check if our service are running and check the health of our server. We also have some auto-healing system that will, for example, make the new, will check if some service is down. For example, sometimes the FMS admin console will fail. So we are able to detect that and to restart it automatically. So it allows us some high availability on this. If we go a bit deeper and to see how a host look like, then we can see here that we have some FMS, well, on the host, we have an FMS, a Docker running, which has many FMS instances and many IP addresses. And we also have some monitoring agent and backup agent that allows us to control how it's going on the host. And all our hosts are running with SSD volumes for the database server and the OS. And we also have backup volume to store all your backups. So everything is secure in the good way here. Okay, and well, okay. Also, just to tell you that we have a special SBA partner solution because our infrastructure is really portable. This is infrastructure as code. It's really easy to give access to our system. So we've built some SBA offer, which is an infrastructure as code that allows you to access our APIs to deploy automatically servers in the data center of your choice, on the host of your choice. So we're able to deploy everywhere in the world and to give you access to a secure control center, and also to our dedicated monitoring server, which allows you to also have insight on how your users are using your solutions. And you can have, of course, a dedicated backup storage if you need. And here we are. I think, well, my server should be up somewhere. Okay, I received here. And no. Okay, my server was here, and what I need is the password that has been sent by SMS. which is a bit hard. I will find it. Just a moment. So usually when we create a server, the login is this one, okay, and the password should be something like something very complicated. Okay, let's try to type it. That should be it. No, it's not this one. What did I type? Problem with my hands, probably. It's okay. That's the demo effect, I guess. Does someone want to talk?
Well, I had a question,
Yeah.
if that's okay. I'd heard some talk about people running tests for performance. Can you speak to that?
Yes. Do you mean the tests which were made by Nick Lightbody, for example?
Yes.
Yes. Yes, he was using our servers to perform his test. And well, what he did was, I don't know if you already see his benchmark file, which is a file which is running several operations at the same time and many processes at the same time on servers to perform to see how much user technically could support. But I'm not the best person to talk about these tests. Nick is not here, but perhaps
actually.
Yeah.
Fabrice speaking here. I've been working. I've been helping Nick a lot on his testing because he has an application that tries to predict the performance of a server in real life situations. So that's his baseline. And well, he was pretty amazed by the Docker architecture, and in fact, I don't know if that was clear, but the great advantage of Docker is that we are in control of the way the physical resources of the server are shared. I'll turn the video on so you can read my lips. And as opposed to a virtual server, when you don't have control about which system is using what resources, with Docker, we are completely, in control. So we can guarantee, of course, that the resources that are on the plan are, the very limit. So if you start with a plan that guarantees X gigabytes of RAM, you're sure that you will get this at the minimum. But you can also get a lot more. Which means that you basically have a much more powerful server than the one you are really paying for. So basically, his approach was both on the performance side and also on the performance per cost side, and both aspects were quite amazing in this comparison. Performance-wise, he concluded that the server was about 3 times faster than comparable cost than a classic virtual Windows hosting service. And also, he noticed that the performance were stable with up to 4 times as many, perform on server sessions, simultaneous sessions. So basically, it was quite mind-blowing. I could probably post the link in the conversation, or you can find it. We referenced it somewhere on our website, because he went through a lot of tests, on his processes running for days and days, both in our European and American data centers, was trying to compare the performance, the impact of the distance and everything. He did a lot of testing for weeks and weeks. It was a very heavy and in-depth work that it did. So I don't know if this answered the question.
Fabrice, I have a further question. Was the determination that the improvement in the number of server sessions, the perform script on server stuff, was the determination that it was as a result of the fact that they were running in the Linux version of server, or did that make the bigger difference, or did the fact that it was running in Docker make the bigger difference?
No, actually, his article is very interesting, because he actually compared a Windows classic virtual server, a Linux similar deployment on a virtual server that we also provided to him, and also the Docker architecture. And the difference is really mind-blowing, not between Windows and Linux, where there is a difference. There are differences actually both ways. So for some things, Windows is even behaves even better than the Linux version, and vice versa, depending on the task. But they're still computers. I mean, they're in the same category. Whereas if you move to Docker, then it's really night and day. Yeah, thank you, Chris, for Chris just posted the link to Nick's article, which is really a must read. I mean, if you're interested, I mean, of course.
Yeah, and Fabrice and Romain, you can correct me if I'm wrong about this, but it's really about what host the setup is running on, because if you were to put the same infrastructure on a smaller or lighter host, you wouldn't get those performance gains.
Actually, yes, obviously, yes, but it becomes very cost efficient, in the sense that you benefit from a beast, in terms of hardware. Yes. For half the price of. So that's where. But of course, yes, there's no miracle. It relies on hardware.
And and I didn't ask earlier about the resource allocation, but basically, it's part of the definition of the Docker container itself, right? You say when this container will spawn, it needs to have this much allocation for, say, RAM and CPU and all those things. So that's the minimum. And I'm sure you can also cap it on the other end, if you want to make sure that it's not going to draw too much resources from the.
Yeah, actually, we could,
sure,
but
it's not necessary. Yeah.
No, because we are. I mean, we are really trying to deliver the best performance. So we prefer having multiple hosts, and you get the best performance and still.
Just as an example, you can see here, this is a screenshot of our monitoring system. Here, this is just one host, okay? As you can see, we ran to, well, it's a bit small. We'll try to improve the size, but yep. We're running over 200 prints on this host. Okay, we have 126 gigabytes, and this is the CPU usage. okay, the total CPU usage on a normal day. There are 32 cores on that host, which means that it could run to 3,200% here. And this is just, as you can see here, there are just some well, hourly source running, and this is the actual usage of the server. So in fact, the feedback that we have now is that the user, well, FileMaker server is not using much CPU, and we always have enough resource for anyone.
Well, hasn't FileMaker server always been low on CPU usage? And as far as what's reported? And
well, the thing is, FileMaker has never been really good at multi-threading.
right.
It has improved in the new versions, but it still does not use a full thread as he could. For example, well, one source will run in one thread. So unless you have really many process running at the same time, and even this, though, I think FileMaker will limit the number of process it will use, because when Nick did his tests, it was during a normal day, and no one on the server felt that he was using as much resource as possible. So he went through the FileMaker's capacity before he reached the host capacity.
Yes, if I can illustrate this, like if you normally what you would see on a server and adding perform script on server sessions, you would see a curve like this with performance like slightly slowing down. I'm doing and what we see with Docker is that it goes up and up and up like this. It's perfect performance, very much higher than the other one. And then suddenly it tops, because FileMaker server basically cannot handle more session for one instance. But actually, the infrastructure underneath is really far from being limited.
So would you say that if even in a resource constrained computer or a host, that you would get better performance? I mean, you wouldn't get the massive performance of a beast machine with the full setup, but if you use the Docker in, say, a lesser machine, you would still get better performance than typical.
Romain, I would.
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Oh, okay.
Well,
so you've described a solution where you use a really powerful machine, assigned it a lot of resources, and FileMaker Server Linux on Docker does a really great job. Now, so it exceeds anything that we've seen before. Could you also get better performance out of a lesser machine because you're running it in Docker, or does Docker just require a bigger machine?
In a virtual machine, no, you won't. Well, you have there's no benefit on running on Docker. The Docker system don't make things faster. The things that make the things faster is because we are not on virtual system. We are on physical hardware, and there's no overhead on CPU cycles and things like that. So you have the full resources available for your process. Let's have an example. For if you take an Amazon server, an EC2 server, and you had storage. The storage, which is provided by Amazon, has a number of input and outputs of operation cycles available. And those this leads directly to the speed, to the read and write speed of your storage. And the more storage you have, the more read and write speed you have. So if you have a small storage, you won't have the full, you won't have a very fast read or write operation. On the other hand, if you have your own hardware like we have, which is with NVMe SSD storage, for example, well, you can reach 1000 megabytes per second read and write process. And that's the point with this kind of architecture. You don't have the same bottlenecks.
Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to offer, as I put in the chat, a cautionary note, a warning about the use of SMS to transmit sensitive information. It is not a secure channel. It can easily be interrupted or intercepted. And in the United States, I don't know about the EU or Canada, but in the United States, the National Institutes of Science and Technology, that's the standard setting body, has indicated that it should not be used at all.
So what would you recommend in its stead?
I don't have an immediate recommendation, Jonathan, for you, but if you'll Google or Bing the term SIM swap, S-I-M swap, you will see what some of the exploits have been.
Oh, okay.
Other encrypted channels, in certain instances, email may be preferred, though email has its problems as well. But when you send something with an SMS message, you are assuming that the recipient is the designated recipient, and that often is not the case.
The point here is that we don't put all our eggs in the same basket. So the password is sent by SMS, but all other information are sent in another way. So that's okay. If we send everything, all the information by email, then if someone gets hacked his email address, then he will, the hacker will have access to all the information. So
and if the SMS is hacked, same thing.
Well, you just have one string with no link to the server. We don't share. Of course, we don't send the server. You just receive just a password without knowing what it is.
That's better. That's better, but be aware of the issues, both technical and regulatory, regarding SMS.
On the other hand, when we send the SMS, there's no data on the server.
And yes, but and still, if you don't provide the mobile number, then you receive 2 emails coming from 2 different accounts and domains. So one with the login and one with the password. So basically, we are doing a better job than AWS, for instance, at this.
Yeah, but that's a good point, Stephen. Thanks. Yeah. Does anybody else have any questions? Wow. All right. Well, again, if anybody has any preference for something they'd like to hear more about, please let me know. I'm available at jonathan@fletcherdata.com. And want to thank Ramon and Fabrice for their terrific work here. I hope to get a chance to test it out personally, because that would be great. Yeah,
really
yeah.
at
Duncan
a
says he thinks
fingertips.
everyone's shell shocked, speechless. Yeah,
Just
it's a pretty impressive feat that you guys have done. So we appreciate you sharing that with us. So anyway,
thank you for hosting us again.
okay.
Again, I promise I will shut my mouth for the next sessions of your wonderful group. And yeah, I mean, I'm just because yes, I see questions in the chat. So of course, the service is at your disposal worldwide, and the pricing is in general, especially except for SBAs and exceptions if you have multiple servers. So it's based on the number of users that is on your FileMaker license. And the free trial is available. So if you want to deploy without paying anything, you can just do as if you were going to buy a license on the website, and at the end, just push the free trial thing, and then boom, the server is deployed for you.
So you get 7 days to try your app out.
Yes, and
Cool.
if you're asked kindly, we can even extend a little bit.
So if people would like to reach out to you, what's your address? Or how would they contact you?
Yeah, I'll put it in the chat. So this is
well, that's a
this
tough
is
one.
our email address.
info@fmcloud.fm.
.fm, like FileMaker.
Cool.
And
what
and
is
FileMaker,
that? What country is
sorry?
that? What that domain?
Actually, it's the extension. The top level is for a radio.
Oh, okay. But that's cool. That's a nice use of it.
And yeah, of course, I mean, feel free to use the form, and if you experience any, issues, or if you have any questions, of course, we're here.
Okay, and so that's also the website is fmcloud.fm. Okay.
Exactly.
Fabrice,
Cool.
can I also ask you?
And just sorry, why I'm advertising. Sorry, Robert. Just one thing. Of course, most of you are, developers and FBAs, or Claris partners, as we say now. And of course, we have a referral program, so you can be rewarded if you just tell us, and we will send you a link that you can share with your customers or on social networks, and then everyone coming to our website from this link will grant you a beer.
Okay, hang on a second, Robert. But you also will take bring your own license. If I,
of course,
as a Claris,
yes.
as a reseller, I can get the license and then just bring it to the
yes. Actually,
install.
on the form you can just key in your serial number, and we check it, and we give you the price for the hosting based on the number of users. It's all
okay. Great. Okay,
and,
Robert,
yeah,
you had a question. You had a question.
Robert.
Well, I was going to say, I thought I saw somewhere that you had an affiliate program or something like that, but I think you just pretty much
yeah, this is
mentioned it before I even did. So that's all.
Cool.
Thank you.
Yes.
So, all right. Well, thank you so much. And we'll see everybody next month. I expect everybody to be back next month. If you did not get our newsletter announcing this meeting, which I usually send out the week before our meetings, just count on it being the fourth Tuesday of the month at this time. So put that in your calendar. But I'll usually put a newsletter out about what's going to be in the next meeting the week before. So if you would like to get that and you don't currently, I'm Jonathan at fletcherdata.com. Jonathan is spelled the traditional way, Jonathan. All other spellings to the contrary. So drop me a line, and I'll add you to our distribution list. So appreciate everybody being here. It's nice to see y'all from all over the world to come visit us here in Kentucky, and we'll catch you next month.
And the weather
Thank
is
you.
absolutely beautiful today.
Yes.
And I miss
Yes.
most of it.
Hey,
because I have
Ann.
an electrician here.
Thank you.
Hello, Ann.
Hello, Brian.